The screaming started at exactly 8:17 a.m. The moment Victoria Sterling realized her precious pearl-white Range Rover was being hoisted into the air by a rusty tow truck, while half the neighborhood stood on their porches with smartphones out, filming her social suicide. 3 hours earlier, this same woman had stood in my driveway with a heavy-duty wrench, systematically smashing the headlights and mirrors of my brand-new, metallic blue Mustang Mach-1. A car I'd worked 60-hour weeks for 3 straight years to afford. There's a specific kind of sickening crunch when custom safety glass meets tempered steel, a sound that represents about $50,000 of dreams turning into glittering shards on the asphalt. But here's the thing that our local HOA tyrant didn't realize. While she was busy trying to break my spirit by breaking my car, I was busy dismantling her entire life from the inside out. I had the bank records, the forged maintenance invoices, and the proof of embezzled community funds that were going to send her to a federal cell by dinner time. I'm Leo, and 6 months ago, I was just a guy looking for a fresh start. At 48, I just survived a brutal divorce that cost me my house in the city, my golden retriever, and a significant chunk of my sanity. I moved to Oakwood Crest, one of those, in quote, perfect, in quote, gated communities in the suburbs of Phoenix where the lawns look like they've been trimmed with nail scissors and everyone smiles at you with teeth that are just a little too white. I thought it would be a sanctuary. I thought I could just keep my head down, work my job as a high-end HVAC contractor, and enjoy my one luxury, that Mustang. I remember the day I drove it home, the way the desert sun hit that deep blue paint, making it shimmer like a mirage. For the first time in years, I felt like I'd actually won something. But that feeling lasted exactly 48 hours before I met Victoria Sterling. Victoria didn't end oppose. T just run the HOA. She owned the atmosphere of the neighborhood. She was about 50, with a bob so sharp it looked like it could cut glass, and a wardrobe of expensive athleisure that suggested she spent her days at a country club plotting world domination. She lived in the largest house on the cul-de-sac, a sprawling Mediterranean villa that sat there like a monument to her own ego. The harassment began on day 3. I found a bright orange citation pinned to my front door because my trash cans had been left out for 2 hours past the pickup time. Apparently, in quote, visual blight, in quote, that lowered property values. Then came the $50 fine for my grass being half an inch too long. Then the $75, in quote, unauthorized outdoor decor, in quote, fine because I had a small, tasteful copper wind chime my mother had given me. I could see her through my window, standing on her manicured lawn with a clipboard, pointing at my house while whispering to her two, in quote, lieutenants, in quote, Marge and Susan, who followed her around like loyal suburban hyenas. But the real war started at the first community meeting. I walked into that clubhouse smelling like industrial coolant and hard work, feeling out of place among the sea of cashmere sweaters and loafers. Victoria presided over the meeting from a raised dais, looking down at us like a queen addressing her peasants. When it was my turn to speak, I tried to be reasonable, asking for a grace period on the landscaping fine since I was still moving in. She didn't end oppose to even look at me. She just adjusted her glasses and said, in a voice that sounded like frozen silk, in quote, Mr. Thorne, Oakwood Crest is a community of standards. If you find those standards too taxing, perhaps your lifestyle is better suited for a rental complex on the other side of the tracks, end quote. The room went silent. I could feel the heat rising in my neck, the familiar spark of a man who has been pushed too far one too many times. She then informed me that my, in quote, aggressive, in quote, blue card didn't in oppose, to meet the, in quote, muted palette, in quote, requirements of the neighborhood, and that I had 1 week to either repaint it or park it in an off-site storage facility at my own expense. That was the moment I realized I wasn't in oppose. T dealing with a stickler for rules. I was dealing with a predator who fed on control. I spent that night digging through the HOA bylaws, fueled by cold coffee and pure spite. What I found was a goldmine. Victoria had been selectively enforcing rules that weren't and oppose. Even in the original covenants. But more importantly, the financial reports were strange. I've run my own business for 20 years. I know what a balanced ledger looks like. And the, in quote, landscaping and security, in quote, expenses for our little neighborhood were high enough to maintain a small private island. I started talking to my neighbors, but most of them were terrified. I met a guy named David, a retired accountant who lived 2 houses down. He looked like he was suffering from PTSD. He told me he'd tried to ask for a formal audit a year ago, and within a week he was hit with 25 separate violations, including one for the, unacceptable curvature, of his driveway. He ended up paying $10,000 in fines and legal fees just to keep his house. The breaking point happened on a Tuesday. I came home to find a deep, jagged scratch running the length of my Mustang, from the front fender to the taillight. It wasn't an Oppos, door ding, This was a message. Someone had taken a key and pressed hard, curling the metal like a ribbon. My heart didn't Oppos. Just sink. It turned into a block of ice. I called the police, but the officer who showed up seemed more interested in getting back to his lunch than helping me. No cameras, no witnesses, probably just some kid from the high school, he said, barely looking up from his notepad. I knew it wasn't Oppos, kids. I knew exactly who it was. I saw Victoria standing in her driveway, clutching a Starbucks cup, watching the police car leave with that same tiny, smug smile she wore during the meetings. She thought she'd broken me. She thought I'd be the next David, cowering in my house until I put up a, for sale, sign. But Victoria made a catastrophic mistake. She assumed an HVAC contractor with 20 years of experience didn't Oppos know how to wire a high-definition 4K surveillance net. Over the next 48 hours, I installed 6 covert cameras, the kind used in high-end commercial security, disguised as floodlights and vent caps. I didn't Oppos. Just want a picture of her. I wanted her soul on camera. While I was setting up the tech, David, the accountant, started slipping envelopes under my door. He'd been secretly documenting the HOAs, spending for years, but was too scared to act alone. We spent 3 nights in my garage, surrounded by tools and blueprints, connecting the dots. It was a masterpiece of suburban fraud. Victoria had set up a dummy corporation called, Sterling Greens Management, Every month, thousands of dollars from our HOA dues were being funneled into this company for, emergency repairs, That never happened. The best part? The company's mailing address was a P.O. box registered to her sister in Nevada. We were looking at a $150,000 embezzlement trail. The climax of her insanity happened last night. At 3:14 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I opened the app and watched, in crystal clear night vision, as Victoria Sterling walked across my lawn. She wasn't Oppos, wearing athleisure this time. She was in a dark hoodie, carrying a heavy-duty pipe wrench. She looked like a shadow, but her face was illuminated by the infrared light, the eyes of a woman who had completely lost her grip on reality. I watched her swing, crunch, left headlight, scrape, driver's side door, smash, side mirror. She was breathing hard, her face twisted in this bizarre, ecstatic rage. She wasn't Oppos, just destroying a car. She was trying to delete my existence from her perfect little world. I didn't Oppos, run out. I didn't Oppos, scream. I just sat there in the dark, recording every single second of that felony-level property damage, feeling a strange, calm sense of satisfaction. I had her. This morning, the neighborhood woke up to a different kind of, visual blight. At 7 a.m., I called the sheriff's department, bypassed the local guys, and asked for the fraud division. I also called a buddy of mine who owns a heavy-duty towing company. See, one of the obscure HOA bylaws Victoria loved to use was the, immediate impound, rule for any vehicle involved in criminal activity on the premises. Since the HOA, owned, the common roads, and she was the one committing the crime, I used her own paperwork to authorize the tow of her Range Rover as, evidence, in a felony investigation. When the tow truck arrived and started hooking up her car, Victoria came charging out of her house, still in her silk bathrobe, screaming about, illegal seizure, and, lawsuits, I stepped out onto my porch, leaning against the railing with my laptop in hand. Morning, Victoria, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet morning air. I think you dropped something in my driveway last night, end quote. I turned the laptop screen toward her and hit play. The sight of her own face, caught in high-definition 4K, smashing my car mirrors, made her go deathly silent. The color drained from her face until she looked like a ghost. But I was in Appos, T done. End quote. While we're talking about evidence, end quote, I continued, end quote. The Sheriff Fraud Unit is currently looking at the bank records for Sterling Green's management. You might want to call your sister in Nevada. I think she's about to have a very long conversation with a federal auditor. End quote. The next hour was like a scene from a movie. Two sheriff's SUVs pulled into the cul-de-sac. Marge and Susan, her, end quote, hyenas, end quote, watched from behind their curtains as their leader was handcuffed right next to her rose bushes. They didn't in Appos. T come out to help her. They just stood there, probably wondering if their own signatures on those HOA documents were going to land them in the same police car. As Victoria was being led away, she turned to me, her eyes filled with a desperate, pathetic kind of hatred, and hissed, end quote, "You've destroyed this community, Leo. You've ruined everything," end quote. I just looked at the wreckage of my Mustang, then back at her, and said, end quote, "No, Victoria. I just did the maintenance work you've been charging us for. I cleared out the trash," end quote. Since that day, the vibe in Oakwood Crest has shifted. It's not, end quote, perfect, end quote, anymore. There are a few more weeds in the lawns, and someone down the street painted their front door a bright, defiant yellow. But for the first time, people are actually talking to each other. We had a meeting last week to dissolve the old board and appoint an interim committee. David is the new treasurer, and he's already found enough recovered funds to give every household a massive rebate on their dues. My Mustang is in the shop getting a full restoration, and the bill is being sent directly to Victoria's frozen assets. It's funny how people think power is this permanent thing, this armor that protects them from the consequences of being a human being. But at the end of the day, power is just a story we tell ourselves until someone with a camera and a backbone decides to tell a better one. Looking back, I realized that Victoria didn't end Appos. T hate me because of my car or my lawn. She hated me because I was a reminder that her control was an illusion. She needed everyone to be afraid so she could feel significant. It makes me wonder how many other, end quote, Oakwood Crest, end quote, are out there where people are living in fear of a neighbor with a clipboard and a chip on their shoulder. So, I'm curious, have you ever dealt with a, end quote, community leader, end quote, who thought they were above the law? Have you ever had to go to extreme lengths just to live in peace in your own home? Drop a comment below and tell me your story. Was I too harsh, or did the punishment finally fit the crime? I want to know if you would have waited for the police, or if you would have taken matters into your own hands like I did. Len Appos, let's talk about it, because sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to let them record their own downfall.